There are several strategies that one can consider. First one being you can have continued critical business function, but conversely you also need to make sure that some of your not so critical business functions are terminated or suspended for some time. We could also consider having reciprocal agreements with selected partners or even competitors, because if you are in a port business, then you may not be able to have another port. You want to have competition and work out in reciprocal arrangements so that the critical business functions can run at each other's site for a short duration. You could also think of minimizing the people interaction, because during pandemic that is the biggest risk one carries. So one could even consider claiming insurance and moving forward, or even do nothing. It really depends on which part of the business is critical to you and which strategy suits that particular function. So in summary, I would say it's a combination of all these strategies for a single organization, because not all functions are critical at any point of time. As the name suggests, business continuity means continuing the business during good times, bad times, during crisis. So that is what business continuity means. Businesses are there to serve the customers. They survive on that. If the customers do not get the service or do not get the service the way they expected, then there's a huge exposure and we could lose clients, lose business. So business continuity is definitely critical to any business. Now, during any crisis, we need to make sure that the business still carries on. At least certain elements of the business which are critical or core must carry on. Pandemic is one type of crisis one can think of. Pandemic puts in certain additional risks during business continuity and additional challenges, and which is surrounded around people. Any critical business function that needs people involvement in a very active manner will be challenged, and it becomes important to re-engineer our service delivery model to make sure that the critical services are offered to the clients. So I would say this is how a pandemic is different from any other crisis. Of course, during pandemic, the biggest thing that happens is panic. So when there is panic, you will see that there will be big absenteeism. So resources will be a constraint, and that will become a big challenge. You need to see that these resources, you need to minimize the interaction with them, and also we realize that with the limited resources you have, there will also be regulations, the health regulations, which will pick up. So these people will get distracted doing a lot other things beyond your critical business functions. The way I see this, the biggest challenge people will have is personnel availability. But on top of that, there will be other challenges. Example, if you have to go and visit customer site, is the customer willing to look and get the service remotely or through phone or through electronic media? Whether the customers are on board and whether your contractual agreements cater to those kind of options with the client. I would say you have to look at the complete ecosystem. Is your partner, is your supplier, is your utility provider having a business continuity plan, and are they able to provide you those facilities that you can provide the service to your client? Last but not least, you could also look at do you get the antiviral medication like Tamiflu? Do you have the personal protective equipment, what is well known as PPE? Are there enough masks? Are there enough gloves available for people to go to customer side and provide the service? I mean, there are of course hundreds of challenges, but I would say these are the, in summary, the top few that one would face during pandemic. One needs to make sure that there is regular communication during pandemic or even prior to pandemic. So it will need good planning as well as communication. The next thing which is very important is BIA, or the business impact analysis, because without the BIA, it is very difficult for you to know which are the critical business functions, and if a particular function goes down, how much would it cost? It is very important to understand the critical business functions, how long can you live without that critical business function, and what is the cost or the impact of that going down. So a BI is very, very critical. Planning and communication very, very critical, and you need to make sure that there are active sites, because you need to have people in multiple locations so that if one location has a problem, the other location can still survive and take your business forward. One more thing that comes to my mind right now is basically looking at the complete pandemic response plan as a multi-phase approach or a framework, more like having a development phase where you are developing all plans, monitoring phase where you monitor and keep a watch on what's going on, an imminent pandemic phase when you actually start activating, a pandemic phase when you are in pandemic, and finally something that gets mostly left out is the post-pandemic phase. Not easily remembered, but a very critical thing, because you need to learn from what happened. There could be a second wave. You also need to make sure that your equipment that has been used up, you need to stockpile that again. So a very important phase that gets missed out.